Is everybody in Alabama racist? Is everyone in Alabama a Bible thumper? And is everyone in Alabama poor and fat? Now those are some terrible stereotypes. We're going to talk about those and a whole lot more. So grab some moonshine. We're going to listen to some Hank Jr. and unbox the state of Alabama. Woo-wee! Purdy girls, big old trucks, and damn football. What do you know? It's a college football game. But not just any college football game. No siree. This is the college football game. This is the Iron Bowl. When Alabama plays Auburn every fall, you might as well shut the whole damn state down. It's a big deal in these parts. Just about every single person in this state has a stake in the winner of the Iron Bowl, and you have to choose between these two teams. The winner gets bragging rights for a whole year. If you're all Roll Tide or all about War Eagle, well, it's going to define who you are as an Alabaman. People don't care where you work or where your hometown is. It's Auburn or Alabama. That's it. And the allegiance to these teams is enough to cause a damn divorce. Yeah, college football is bigger in this state than you can imagine. Alabama usually wins this game, but sometimes Auburn, damn.
25-30, 35-40, 45-50, 45.
Oh,
there goes
no.
Davis. Oh my God! Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the
What
football
in the
game.
hell?
Auburn's going to win the football game.
Well, hell with this college football stuff. I don't even like football anyways. I'm never watching another damn game again. Alabama has a lot of stuff to do, and it has lots of various areas to live, and it's probably different than you thought. If you're thinking about moving here, there's a lot you should know about Alabama. That way you don't have to annoy people at Piggly Wiggly with all your annoying questions. This is Alabama. As you can see, most of the people are in the middle part of the state, and most of the poverty is in the middle part of the state too. Alabama has a little bit of everything though. Some smallish mountains, some farmland, some big cities, and even a little coast. But we're going to begin up here in northern Alabama. About 20% of Alabama's population is in this region of the state. Much of northern Alabama is hilly, and it's heavily forested in many areas. There's great places to camp and hike. It has a teeny bit of Appalachia up here in northern Alabama too. You may not know it, but 2/3 of Alabama is forest, and a lot of what isn't forest is taken up by farmland. Over here is Florence, which is a pretty decent place to live, especially if you love nature. There's a lot of blue-collar work up this way, and it's cheap living, where you can get a home for $130,000. Hey, it's Alabama. And separating Florence from the rest of the state is the Tennessee River. A lot of people call this the Tennessee Valley, and right across the river is Mussel Shoals. It too is a pretty decent place to live. In fact, the whole Shoals area up here is pretty much a bunch of small towns and some good manufacturing and energy jobs, and it's surrounded by mostly farmland and trees. This part of the state's also the birthplace of blues. Down the river a bit's Decatur, which has a lot of chicken farms, so it stinks. You wouldn't want that job. There's also quite a few industrial and manufacturing jobs, and some big companies like GE and 3M are here. It's also a pretty nice place to live. There's about 55,000 people here and growing. Up here at Scottsboro, the unclaimed baggage center of the world. That's right, there's a 40,000 square foot warehouse here where everybody's lost luggage ends up. After a few months, the airline can do whatever they want with your lost stuff. Often it's sold here. So one day, somebody in rural Alabama might own your old dirty undies. It's kind of a big deal. More than 1 million people come here every day to buy everybody's old stuff. South of that's Marshall County, which is home to Guntersville Lake and Guntersville Resort State Park. Believe it or don't, Marshall County, Alabama is home to the hottest housing market right now. That's right. Way out here in no man's land, Alabama. A lot of people have been looking to scoop up vacation homes like these in remote areas as a way to socially distance. There's no better place to do that in Alabama where it's damn cheap. Look at the percentage gain on interest in Marshall County, Alabama. Woo-wee! Of course, Guntersville Lake is popular for fishing and boating, and hunting is also a big deal in Alabama, as you can imagine. Tons of folks down here fish and hunt and own damn guns. Most folks own firearms responsibly, and they view gun control as an attack on their values and their culture. I mean, the state motto here is, "We dare defend our rights." They're hard-working folks, Alabamans are. On a lot of days, Alabama people go home from work and they crack a beer and shoot a deer. Both the men and the women, sometimes even the kids. In some parts of rural Alabama, fast food means it's moving, and if you miss, you don't eat. Now over here is the opposite of all that rednecky stuff. This is Huntsville, perhaps the least southern of all Alabama cities. Huntsville's the fastest growing part of Alabama. You could say Huntsville today is an island of culture and intelligence, adrift in a sea of rural decay. It's home to a bunch of high-tech jobs in aerospace and engineering. Companies like NASA and Boeing have headquarters here. Almost all of Alabama's smart people live here, and it has one of the highest concentrations of PhDs and engineers per capita in the nation. The suburb of Madison might be the best place to live in the Huntsville area. Alabama's trying to go through a cultural, demographic, and socio-economical transition, and Huntsville's the center of all that. It's a sprawling, bustling community where people of all backgrounds and races are coming to work on really forward-thinking projects. If there's going to be a place in the state with diversity, and one where you're going to hear something besides Spanish being spoke, it's likely going to be here. Home prices are about $250,000, but get in on it now, folks. They're going up fast. Yes, Alabama, or at least part of it, is actually becoming a destination for growth and jobs. However, in Alabama, there's a big divide between urban and rural. You drive 3 miles from a major city, and it looks like it did 50 years ago. There's a lot of poverty in Alabama, as you probably know. And we're going to skip all the way down to southern Alabama now to show you an example of this. Now, way down here, kind of near the Florida state line, is Dothan. There's 67,000 people here. I was recently in Dothan and just picked a random street and drove around and found this neighborhood, which is in total decay, although I saw a lot of friendly smiles. In rural Alabama, poverty is a major problem, since most of the resources are being taken up by the big cities. It's actually a lot like this in many of Alabama's rural communities. Alabama's the 5th poorest state overall when you measure family income levels and government assistance. Statewide, the average family makes about $50,000 a year, and about 17% of the state lives in poverty, although in places like Dothan, like this, that number's closer to 25%. The United Nations once did a study on poverty across the world, and they wanted to compare poverty here in the U.S. to the rest of the globe, so they needed a place to measure it. Their benchmark? Alabama. Also down here in the bottom corner of the state, it's a lot of farming, especially peanuts. Half the peanuts grown in the country come from this corner of the state. But Alabama's also a leader in aquaculture too. This state ranks high in the nation for the number of fish pulled out of its waters, and it's second in the nation for production of catfish. There's a big coastal fishing industry here, so the Alabama coast is kind of a big deal when it comes to its economy. Most of southern Alabama is rural, poor towns along the Florida state line, but Mobile is a step up from that. It's a pretty city along the Mobile Bay right on the Gulf. If Huntsville's cosmopolitan and diverse, Mobile is not that. It's very laid back and kind of dangerous, but not too bad. Some parts of Mobile might remind you of New Orleans. But remember, Mardi Gras originally began in Mobile. It's sunny down here, and there's a lot of history and some really pretty old antebellum homes. A lot of the jobs are relying on shipping, fishing, and tourism. Spring break down here is crazy, as it is along the rest of Alabama's Gulf Coast. Places like Orange Beach and Gulf Shores are really nice beaches that get nuts in the summer. Baldwin County might be the prettiest county in the state down here along the coast. There's all sorts of cute little quaint small towns here along the coast, and white, squeaky clean sandy beaches. Look at this pic. Wow, right here in Alabama. Places like Bay Minette and Daphne and Fairhope are all quiet and safe and clean and super inexpensive. Like a home down here is only $250,000. Get in on that, people. Then you have Dauphin Island, which is also really pretty. You can live down here for an extra $100,000. There's a ton of coastal naturey stuff down here that a hurricane will one day, probably, maybe, sadly, make gone eventually. But it's cool today. I bet you didn't know Alabama had so many cool little coastal towns, did you? That are kind of undiscovered. I mean, this is one of the least visited states in the country, after all. Now, the north end of Mobile is far less nice and charming, and Pritchard, just outside of Mobile, could be called a ghetto, and they couldn't argue with that. You wouldn't want to live in Pritchard, probably. The weather down there is terrible for many months, as it is in much Alabama. Down here along the Gulf, and in most Alabama, it's 3 seasons: hot, hot and humid, and brown and chilly. It's humid even in the winter. Tornadoes are a big deal here now, and it seems like every spring there's a tornado outbreak in Alabama. Hurricanes can also be a big deal here too, but most of them hit Louisiana and Florida. And if it happens to snow in Alabama, or they get an ice storm, forget about it. Now we're going to move up here to what's called the Black Belt. This part of the state has a history of farming and slaves. They originally called this the Black Belt because of the region's rich black soil, which made farming a big deal. Back in the day, this was one of the richest and most powerful regions in the nation because of all the farms. But my, how things have changed now. Currently, this is the poorest part of the state, although it's still reliant on agriculture. Alabama's 7 poorest counties are all along this region of the state, and if you look at the voting patterns for the last election, it's all blue. So you could call the Black Belt the Blue Belt, too. Half the population of the Black Belt is, well, black. Household incomes hover around $27,000 a year. The population's declining, but not going down tremendously. Alabama's Black Belt is pretty much small towns with high unemployment and very limited opportunities outside of farming. A lot of the communities here have limited access to health care and education, and the schools are severely underfunded and there's lots of crime. It's certainly not an area you'd want to be. Or maybe you do. The food culture here is big in this part of the state. If you want Italian, it's going to be Macaroni Grill, because in Alabama, barbecue is king.
This video brought to you by Mike's Barbecue.
On Route 32 in Talladega.
Come on down, we got some great food. That's Mike's Barbecue.
As are cornbread, fried chicken, potato salad, and sweet tea. They also eat lots of hush puppies, grits, catfish, and fried green tomatoes. And there's a lot of Greeks down here for some reason, so there's a lot of Greek food. Maybe they like the hot and the humid and all the smoking. But all that bad fried food and the sugar and the prevalence of smoking and the lack of exercise here is why so many Alabamans are obese. Alabama's the 9th fattest state of all, and it's a leader in diabetes and heart disease. Mix in rural poverty, there's some real issues here, health-wise.
This is Mike at Mike's Barbecue again. Did I mention that we got gator? We got some good gator. Come down and try our gator and we will throw in some hush puppies. That's Mike's Barbecue
on Route 32 in Talladega. Alabama people are pretty nice about everything, despite their poor health and relative poverty. Most Alabamans are Southern charming in the sense that they'll hold the door for you or smile. There's a lot of sir and ma'ams and honey and sugar, but it's Southern hospitable with some reservation and skepticism. If you move here, you'll notice that Alabamans are friendly, but guarded. Much is said while little is spoken here. There's a lot of hints and coyness in how people hold conversations. And there's a lot of behind-your-back gossipy stuff down here too. Of course, meth is bad in rural areas of Alabama. There's a common stereotype that Alabama's full of hicks and rednecks and meth heads. Yes, there's a ton of that here, just like in any other state, but it's more of a subculture. A lot of Alabama rednecks are hard-working folks, and they have trucks and boats that are bigger than your trucks and boats. What defines a redneck anyway? Well, stereotypical things like trailer parks, a lack of education, and poverty. Well, Alabama does have the nation's 4th most trailer parks of any other state. It's also the 9th least literate state, and we already talked about how poor this state is. So does Alabama meet the stereotypical criteria for having a lot of rednecks? Kinda. Sorta. And then there's politics. This state is very red, despite the fact that 28% of the population's black. Most of the old-timers here were Democrats, and then they switched over to the Republican Party when the Jim Crow laws were outlawed in the 60s. A lot of people here still talk about their love of former Democratic Governor George Wallace, and they wish the federal government would get back to the ways things used to be in these parts. But as it stands today, this is hardcore Republican land. Politics, religion, and racism, those are the 3-pronged forks of a lot of Alabama's old-time culture, and that's still around today. And they're tied together deeply. Racism guides the politics, which guides religion, which impacts racist attitudes. It's all very complicated. The KKK was a big deal here back in the day, and some of that stuff's still around. If you moved here, you're going to find there's still people who are anti-black and anti-gay. But the racism here today is a lot more subtle. A lot of it's closeted racism. Just about everybody here was forced to deal with the whole black-white thing in the 60s, and most have forgotten about it. It's not perfect here, but probably better than you might think. And finally, we come to Central Alabama. Now, this is where all the people are, people. Now, earlier we talked about religion and how important church is to Alabama folks. Outside of a few pockets in the metro areas, it's Christian or nothing. Most people in Alabama are rabid Southern Baptists. If you're Jewish or Mormon, you won't have many friends. If you're Muslim, you will have a lot of enemies, sadly. That's just the way it is down here. But football is the real religion in Alabama. Come on now. Woo-wee, it is. Football is king in Alabama. There's diehard fans, there's obsessive fans, and then there's Alabama fans. Schedule a wedding on game day, and half the people won't come. Schedule a funeral when the Iron Bowl's going on, and nobody will come. Tuscaloosa is here in central Alabama, kind of way out in no man's land. There's 120,000 people here in Tuscaloosa. A lot of the city centers around the University of Alabama, but there's more to Tuscaloosa than just the U of A. It's kind of becoming a mini car-making hub, and they're working hard to bring in some new tech companies. But it's probably better as a place to retire than to begin a family. And you know who isn't poor in Tuscaloosa? Their head coach. He made $9 million last year, more than any other public figure in the state. I guess you get what you pay for. Alabama's been winning national titles left and right lately. Now way over here is Auburn, home to Auburn University. That's Alabama's rival. This is actually a really good place to live. It's been called one of the best small southern towns in the country. It has a small town charm, and there's enough to do to keep you entertained, and it's safe. You'd be far, far away from everybody else in the state though, and maybe that's a good thing. This is Lake Martin. It's a bunch of really pretty lake homes and rich Christians who think they're better than everybody else in the state because they can afford a place at Lake Martin. And over here is Talladega. It's pretty rundown and dangerous. This is home to Alabama's prized NASCAR track, so there's that. NASCAR is a pretty big deal here in Alabama, in case you didn't know, but it's less popular now than ever. Also over here on this side of the state are two other cities of note, Gadsden and Aniston. These two are about as dangerous and run down as it gets for big-ish cities in this state. Overall, as a state, it's about average crime-wise, but it would be even safer here if it wasn't for the high crime pockets in places like these two cities. Now over here is Montgomery, the state capital. Now Alabama has 4 cities that all have about 200,000 people. We talked about Huntsville and Mobile already. Between Montgomery and Birmingham, Montgomery is a little bit safer. Montgomery has a cute-ish downtown area that feels safe at night, and it's actually really clean. There isn't a ton to do here, though, so you might get bored. They have a nice little riverwalk area, though, and it's far cheaper to live in Montgomery than it is in Birmingham. Home prices are about half as those in Birmingham. The biggest problem with Montgomery is finding a decent place to live. Some areas on the north and east end aren't too bad. The suburb of Prattville's kind of nice. But if you drive just a minute from downtown Montgomery, kind of in any direction, and it's straight up ghetto. Here's a drive I took just 5 minutes from downtown Montgomery not too long ago. Homes are boarded up, they're abandoned, there's cops everywhere. There was even a sign on this house warding off druggies. I've never seen anything like that, and this is just a few minutes from downtown. So Montgomery suburbs are in bad shape. Now in Birmingham, things are different. It's way more dangerous here. It's also more expensive, but there's also way more to do here. And there's some really nice suburbs here to choose from too. Like most of the southern burbs of Birmingham are actually really nice. Places like Hoover, Vestavia Hills, Homewood, Chelsea, and Mountain Brook are all kind of good. If you want a big city life and a nice, safe suburban living, pick southern Birmingham suburbs, even way out to Shelby County. If there's going to be any snobs in Alabama, it's going to be in Shelby County. Everywhere except Bessemer. This is probably the worst place to live in the whole state. It's dangerous and ghetto. Don't move there. Or Tarrant. Actually, a lot of Birmingham suburbs are economically segregated. You have the richest people in the state in one area and the poorest people just down the road. And gentrification's creating issues here. Crime's really bad. But sadly, in America, that's just how things are nowadays. Alabama has a lot of good. Many people here feel the Alabama today will never be as good as the Alabama of yesterday, nor will tomorrow be as good as today. Alabama has made a lot of strides. Unlike its neighbor to the west, Mississippi, it's still very segregated here, but it's more of an economic divide, not so much a racial one, although racism still has deep roots here. It traditionally hasn't been a very progressive state, and there's been a much slower pace to life down here in the past, and some of that's changing. It's a state where people mistrust change, though. Many people here mistrust anything outside of Alabama's borders. But that means they're going to have to learn to trust each other then, if they want to continue their state's progress and convince all those who don't want change to accept it. That way, the progress and growth and jobs and the optimism and the state pride here can continue. Because y'all don't want to begin to look like your neighbor Mississippi. That would not be good. Okay, so we did a pretty good job of talking about Alabama, didn't we? Woo-wee, we did! It's a misunderstood state, but it's a great place to live, despite all their health and poverty challenges. We could have talked about a lot of different stuff, too. Like, we didn't even talk about how everybody goes to Walmart for fun. Seriously, if you haven't seen your friends and family for a while, just go down to Walmart. Some people take their dates to Walmart in Alabama. But it's time to go. I know I said I wasn't going to watch another damn football game again, but Alabama's in the playoffs, and I wouldn't miss that game for the world. No, I wouldn't. Here's a pretty little song. Everyone should moving on down to the south now. Come on, baby, move to Alabama. It's not what you're used to, but you'll figure it out now. Come on, baby, move to Alabama. My wife and all her sisters don't have any teeth. My mama and my daddy towed a trailer for me. So come on, move to Alabama with me. It's the sweet home life now. Come on and see my Dixieland delight. Cousin is my lover and my uncle's my dad now. Come on, baby, move to Alabama. I got a truck, that's all we'll need to get into town now. Come on, baby, move to Alabama, please. Thanks to Donald and Jessica for talking to me about Alabama. You guys are awesome. And thanks to Jose at Southern Life for letting me use his awesome footage of Alabama. You should subscribe to him. Hey guys, if you learned something new about America or what it's like to live in America, great. You should think about subscribing and turning on your notifications. You can also click one of these videos or playlists for more. You can also now buy my songs on iTunes and other formats. Click the link in the description. Thanks for watching. And remember, while we all might have different views, we should all be nice to each other and try to make the U.S. a better place in a positive way.
This is Sage, Nick's manager. This has been a Corner House Entertainment production.
I've heard good things. I've been there a couple times. I just spent a couple days down there. The people are really friendly. They, just like any state, they got a lot of stuff to deal with some poverty, especially in the rural areas. But overall, though, I think the stereotypes could probably be more applied to Mississippi, your cousin next door.
You still got a lot of racists in Alabama.
Yeah.
It's still there.
Yeah.
But
would you say it's like a closeted racism?
Yeah. Yeah. I can say that. A lot of people, I know people that are stark racist that say, I'm not racist. I'm not sure a lot of people realize what a racist is,
Yeah.
But yeah, they still, but at the same time, they're not out killing people or running them over, or they would help them if they could.
What's the solution to Alabama's racist attitudes that still persist to this day? What do we got to do to get people to knock it off?
Time. Because it's the evangelicals that's pushing all this hatred. I come from an evangelical background. I was in church, and I've been seeing this happen for years now. And I used to tell people it's got to where church is scaring me, and they thought I was nuts, but this is exactly what I was talking about, and the Jesus I was taught about don't support the things that the evangelicals are supporting now. And we got to wake up. The president of the Southern Baptist Convention, he just took over because the last president was having women, and they fired him. And a new guy got there. This is last year or a year before. And they were having their board meeting. And it was brought up that maybe we should change our name from evangelical because we're really getting a bad rap. And the new president said no. He said, what we need to change is our hearts. Nothing wrong with the name. We got to change our hearts. So time is going to matter.
What is it about the evangelical church that they're preaching that is dividing? I mean, I don't go to an evangelical church. Like, what are they? Right. Is it their MO?
It's the outward racism that's came out, in the Trump era. the Bible says to love people, take care of the underprivileged, have compassion. And, they want to hang people down here at the border, and, they separating families. They're losing their children. They've lost over 350 children, somewhere like that. I'm not sure about that number. I read it the other night. They don't even know what happened to them. And how do we support that if we're going to call ourselves Christians? Christians don't do that. Don't necessarily let them flood into the country. We can't do that either, but treat people with respect. And thank God that we're in the country everybody's wanting to run to, Yeah. I think evangelicals, they got into I'm going to prosper. I'm going to make a lot of money. That seems to be the message, and it's not compassion and love and understanding anymore. And
give people an idea on how big not only Alabama football, but the rivalry between Auburn and Alabama, and how big college football is down there in your state.
I'm for two teams in college football, Alabama and whoever's playing Auburn. A lot of places has rivalries, some big rivalries. But in Alabama, families split up. People get divorced. People have fights all over Alabama, Auburn. It's huge. It's larger than you can imagine.
Yeah.
If you haven't been there, it's like it's serious business. I had a friend of mine tell me, and it's a lot of truth to it. They say Alabama is the worst losers. Auburn is the worst winners. Alabama don't like to lose, and when Auburn beats Alabama, they really rub it in. We used to say Alabama was the best kept secret in the world. And then when all these businesses started coming, which is good, it sort of changed that now, because we used to have our own little redneck thing there, and now it's people coming in from all over, and it's changed.
I heard a lot of people are still Southern Democrats in the sense that they were fans of George Wallace, who came in and kind of did some stuff. He was a Democrat, one of the last, I guess, Democrats to be elected at the higher level down there. You got these people that swear they are Republican and red, but deep down there's some Democrat in them from back in the day.
Well, I seen a comparison here before this last election, and they showed the platform in like the early 80s, I think, late 70s, early 80s, the platform from the Democrats and the platform for the Republicans compared to now. We've almost switched our platforms.
Yeah.
So Democrats back then were more like Republicans now. It's flip-flopped in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So they're still pretty much the same people. It's just the parties have changed.
Yeah.
To an extent.
Yeah. And that's something that people, the whole black-white thing, a lot of people don't understand that the Democrats used to be pro-slavery. And then, a lot of the black community says they hate Republicans. Well, they were actually trying to get change stuff around.
Lincoln was a Republican, right?
Yeah, right.
There you go.
Since you lived in Birmingham for a long time, what it's like in Birmingham, the good and the bad.
Well, it's a big town. It's the biggest part of Alabama, but it's just a lot of crime there.
Yeah.
So.
Like shootings every day kind of stuff?
Yeah, bad drugs and everything in downtown especially, and that's where I spent 14 years pretty much ever. So you had to lock your doors, wasn't very safe.
Is it worse now than it was when you lived there, you think?
I think it has gotten worse. From my friends up there that are still up around that area, they say, yeah, it has gotten worse. But that's because it's grew, So a lot of people have moved out of Birmingham and out into the suburbs. And
What are a couple stereotypes of Alabama that exist that you think are not true?
Well, that we're all kissing our cousin or anything. We're not kissing cousins. And we're not, and we're also a lot of us are educated, you know. I mean, we
Yeah.
didn't just, I mean, yes, a lot of us dropped out or eventually got their college degree and stuff like that, but there are a lot of educated people and people that have made good lives for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not all kissing cousins and uneducated fools.
Does Alabama look down on Mississippi?
You know, I've always never thought that, but now that I talk with a few friends nowadays, it seems like we do. And I mean, I went through Mississippi and I've never really seen, and I know of several Mississippians that are my good friends, but I don't see nothing different in us. But I've heard that stigma before from a couple friends in Alabama.
Yeah. Mississippi and Alabama tend to get stereotyped together as being, backwards, dumb, rednecks.
Yeah.
But like when you look at it, it's actually not that. Alabama's far better in terms of its economy and its progressiveness.
Yes.
There's issues in both states, but I think Mississippi just has a lot of room to grow.
Yeah, they do. They do.
Do I look Alabama?
No, that's
No. What does that look? Does this look more like, where would that be? Where do you mean?
I don't know. Or that was Irish Alabamian, like trailer park. I don't know.